My name is Darren Campbell, and I'm a serving member of the RCMP. My policing career began in September of 1990 when I was sworn into the RCMP. On that day, I swore that I would faithfully, diligently, and impartially execute and perform my duties, and to obey and perform all lawful orders that I receive without fear, favor, or affection of or towards any person. That was an oath I took very seriously on that day, and one that I continue to take very seriously to this day. My 32-year career with the RCMP has taken me from the Pacific Coast to central Canada and to the Maritime provinces. The bulk of my career has been focused in the area of major crimes, major case investigations, and criminal operations. As part of my duties, I've been operationally deployed across our entire country and internationally. I'm committed to serving Canadians, the communities that I have served and continue to serve. I'm a proud member of the RCMP, and at the present time, I am the interim criminal operations officer for the RCMP in the province of New Brunswick. In April of 2020, I held the rank of superintendent. I was a support services officer for the RCMP in Nova Scotia. In that role, I was responsible for a number of specialized policing resources, including but not limited to the Provincial Major Crimes Unit and the Critical Incident Program. As you are well aware, on April 18th and 19th, 2020, the RCMP in Nova Scotia responded to a mass casualty incident where Gabriel Wortman took the lives of 22 innocent people, and he injured many others. This incident became known as the worst mass murder in Canadian history. The perpetrator's actions devastated victim families, survivors, and has forever changed the lives of many. This unprecedented massacre spurred a major case investigation titled Operation H-Strong. The objectives of H-Strong were clear: to fully investigate the murders and attempted murders and to gather sufficient evidence to determine Gabriel Wortman's involvement in these horrible crimes. Further, the objectives also set out to determine if anyone had assisted Gabriel Wortman in any way before, during, or after the crimes, and if so, to gather sufficient evidence to successfully prosecute those believed to be involved. I am aware of certain allegations of political interference directed to the RCMP with respect to the investigation into the mass casualty incident. At the heart of the issue is my recollection of a meeting that I was called to attend on April 28, 2020. This meeting took place immediately after I completed a lengthy national press conference which relayed the facts that could be disclosed to the public at that time. To that point, I had provided more than 2 hours and 15 minutes of live national news conferences about what the police knew and what we could share with the media and with the public. The meeting had been called by the Commissioner of the RCMP and was attended by representatives from the RCMP in Ottawa as well as Nova Scotia. Prior to that meeting, I did not specifically know why the meeting had been called. However, once the call commenced, the purpose of the call became very clear. The Commissioner expressed in no uncertain terms her clear disappointment that I did not release specific information in my news conference related to the firearms used by the gunman. What was relayed to me and others during that call is at issue here today. I made notes, as is my practice, specific to that meeting. I advised several of my colleagues that I had made notes about what had transpired in that meeting. I disclosed all of my notes as required to the Department of Justice Canada for dissemination to the Mass Casualty Commission. I was not aware that my notes from April 28, 2020 had not been disclosed to the Mass Casualty Commission until recently. I stand by the notes that I made on April 28, 2020. I have a distinct recollection of the content of that discussion between the Commissioner, my colleagues, and I. In my view, the purpose of the call was to allow the Commissioner to express her disappointment with the fact that I did not relay specific or detailed information about the firearms used by Gabriel Wortman. On several occasions during that call, the Commissioner stated that she felt disrespected, that she was sad and disappointed with the fact that I had not released the information about the firearms used, and that she had been advised that I would release that information. The Commissioner also said that she had promised the Minister and the Prime Minister's office that information about the firearms would be included in the press briefing. As detailed in my notes, I attempted to explain to the Commissioner that I could not and would not release that information at that time, as a premature release could have a negative impact on the investigation. It was at that time the Commissioner told my colleagues and I that we didn't understand, that this was tied to pending legislation that would make officers and the public safer. I left that meeting feeling deflated, and to borrow the Commissioner's words, sad and disappointed. My position was firm that I would continue to protect the integrity of the investigation by not releasing any information that could have a negative impact on ongoing investigative efforts. We owed this to the victim families, the survivors, to the public, and to those tasked with completing an impartial, competent, and professional investigation. There are very good reasons for that. The approach to not releasing specific information related to the firearms remained in place by the investigative team until information related to the firearms used by Gabriel Ortman was released in November 2020 through an access to information and privacy request directed at the Prime Minister's office, not the RCMP. Within the disclosure of that information via ATIP was specific information related to the firearms used by Gabriel Ortman in the commission of the offences. The release of the unedited information would eventually have a negative impact on individuals and could have harmed the ongoing multi-agency investigation. So in summary, it was never my intention to enter into a political or public disagreement or discussion as to what took place in that meeting, nor was my response to the meeting based on any personal issues with the Commissioner or indeed any other individuals, nor was it based on politics. At the heart of the issue was a matter of principle and sound investigative best practices related to protecting the ongoing investigation, which at the time was in its early stages. The principle was the oath that I swore to uphold as a young recruit over 3 decades ago. I could not and would not break that oath, which is sworn by all members of the RCMP. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks, and I wish to thank you and the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. I welcome any questions that committee members may have on the issue.
I'd like to start by thanking the witnesses, not only for being here today, but also for the quality of their opening remarks. Mr. Campbell, I'd like to start with a question to you. And I just want to mention something that I think everyone should be keeping in mind during their answers. And that is that the press release that Commissioner Lucky issued in June 2022, she said that she would never take any steps or make any decisions that might compromise an inquiry. So if we go back in time to the conversation that you had on April 28th, Mr. Campbell, at that time, did you have the impression that the Commissioner understood the scope of what she was asking, that she understood the scope of the risk of what she was asking? Did she understand, do you think, that communicating the type of firearm used might compromise the inquiry?
So thank you for your question. I do believe that the Commissioner, as a seasoned police officer, would understand that certain information should be protected, particularly if there are multiple agency ongoing investigations. So I can't speak for the Commissioner. However, I think that it's reasonable for me to answer that question in that way.
And at the time of this discussion on April 28th, you yourself raised the question of, or the issue that this might cause the inquiry to be compromised. Is that correct?
I did in terms of not just the investigation that was being handled by the RCMP at that time, but also, as I stated earlier, multiple investigations by multiple agencies, including international agencies as well. That was made clear to the Commissioner. That was made clear to my colleagues. I had been asked, in fact, leading up to that press conference by my colleagues within Strategic Communications in Nova Scotia if I could say more about the firearms. And I explained to my colleagues in Nova Scotia the reason why I could not. And that was clearly communicated to everyone. And it was actually quite simple.
Est-ce que vous pourriez me
Could you describe the way Commissioner Lucky reacted when you talked to her about how important it was not to communicate that information?
Well, Chair, as I explained in my opening remarks, the Commissioner was upset. The Commissioner made me feel as if I was stupid and I didn't seem to understand the importance of why this information was important to go out, the information specific to the firearms as it was related to the legislation. She didn't seem to appreciate or recognize the importance of maintaining the integrity of an investigation.
Est-ce que vous pourriez me
Could you tell me around how long that part of the discussion lasted? Like the part of the discussion that was specifically about the risk of compromising the inquiry?
Well, of course, I'm going back more than 2 years since that conversation took place. But I would say that my comments to the commissioner and others that were in that meeting probably lasted at least 2 minutes of me trying to explain. And it was on the heels of that explanation is where I was provided information, or I was told that this was, this was very important because this was about legislation that was going to make officers and the public safer. That was the response I received to my rationale provided for not releasing the information.
Est-ce qu'à
At any point, did Commissioner Lucky try to refute your arguments? When you were arguing that this would pose a risk to the inquiry? Did she try to convince you that there was no risk? Or did she simply want the information to be revealed for other reasons?
My recollection is that the commissioner did not dismiss what I had said in those terms, meaning that she didn't believe that it would have a negative impact or try to provide a different perspective. She immediately linked it to ongoing efforts to bring forward some new legislation.
Donc, je comprends.
So, to summarize, the conversation about the risk of talking about the specific firearms used, that was actually a fairly short conversation, and the commissioner did not try to refute your argument, but it seemed to her that this issue of risk didn't seem relevant to her. Did I summarize that correctly, in your opinion?
For my opinion, I would say that the commissioner felt that the release of the information was more important in her view, because the focus of that discussion was in and around the fact that I did not release that information.